G'day and welcome to another episode of Cuppa with a Jesuit. I'm Father Robin Koning, the Provincial Assistant for Vocations for the Australian Jesuit Province.
With Father Robin, I'm Julian Butler, a Jesuit in formation for priesthood, and we're joined today by Father Andy Bullen. Father Andy, welcome.
My pleasure.
Father Andy, you've had a range of roles in different ministries in your time as a Jesuit. At the moment, you've been given some time to spend writing poetry, among other things, and the arts and poetry has been an important part of your Jesuit life. Would you explain something of that engagement with visual and literary art in your Jesuit life?
Yes, well, the visual side is totally, you might say, a hobby that's got massively out of control. I've never had a class on art or anything of it, but where other people watch various sporting things, I tend to go to art galleries, or I have a collection of catalogues and so on. And that's what I do. And I've been doing that really since I was a teenager. And it sustains me in many ways. And sometimes it's just, a strong experience. It's built up a fair bit of knowledge, and it raises lots of interesting questions for me. I'm very interested in the whole shaping of the imagination generally, and then, let's say, the religious imagination, and indeed the Ignatian imagination. And there's a lot to be said on all of that, and there's a lot that's sort of still up in the air about it, I think, really. So that's that. I actually do have written poetry. I'm always a bit careful about saying, and will write again. I have no idea if I will write again. The record so far is fitfully. And but when it happens, it's pretty intense. And I'm fortunate enough, eventually I got a book written. But and it's fascinating that, in the sort of the depths of your emotional and psychological and spiritual life, there's this uncertain thing that sometimes happens. And when it happens, it's absolutely crucial. And I like the idea, really, that at the center of my life is stuff I have no control over, except occasionally it shows. And when it does, I'm going to say I drop everything, but it takes over everything. And you do it, and you go, oh my goodness, look what's happening here. And then it goes. It's done. It's done. And I can, I've written poems and I've completely forgotten about some of them. Oh, I wrote that, did I? And others come back, or phrases come back. So it's a completely haphazard element in the center of my life. Thank God. That's pretty good. I think that's a good thing.
It sounds, Andy, like there's something. There's a deeply spiritual element to both that engagement with visual art and also the writing of poetry, but also a note of something that's testing or provides a reflective space for what is my spirituality, how am I engaging with questions of faith through aesthetics. Would you share something about how those different mediums are helpful in that kind of reflecting?
Well, they, for me at any rate, they give me clues about what's going on in society generally, or culture generally, how people shape their lives or can shape their lives. And I did some sort of hard study of it. I did an endless MA years ago at Monash on some religious preoccupations of some Australian poets. And I don't know. I don't know whether all degrees like this end up with the word "some" injected, all the way through the phrase. But that's what happened. And I did a lot of work on that, and I'm very grateful I did it. So I was held the whole thing together with the idea of disclosure, something that happens, a deep experience. You can't make it happen. That's called magic. So you don't do that. Or you take drugs, you don't do that. So you're waiting. So there's this experience of waiting. And that's recurrent, I think, in the sort of the religious tradition, but in the poetic tradition, certainly. And it's very interesting to note that. One's disposed for things to happen, but whether they do or not is not something one does. It happens, and then you make something of it, and then it goes quiet. So I did a lot of work on that, and it did influence me a lot. And I suppose when I'm preaching or talking or thinking or writing, it comes back. So but it did have a fair bit of scholarly work on it years and years ago. And like all of these MAs, 3 people have read them, and 1 person can remember some of it. So, but anyway, that said, it was very formative for me. So that's something that linked very, very well with our religious tradition. We're very active, and at the core of it, we're waiting. I like that tension. In fact, many people say I don't like tension, but I think tension, what St. Ignatius is on about. He doesn't withdraw us from tension; he pushes us into it. Really, you don't like tension? Well, here's more.
Andy, it may have been only 3 people who read the whole of your master's thesis, but I was with you there at Campion when you were writing it, and we were treated to lines from it. You'd come down to morning tea with your latest line, and then lunch with your latest line. I think I remember one of them was something like, "Poetry can be silence worded." Does that ring a bell at all?
Yes,
Something like that.
Because I was writing about silence. I mean, crazy thing to write about. But anyway, I was.
And you sort of suggested that particularly the visual art is like a hobby grown out of all proportion. One of the joys, I think, of Jesuit life is being able to give life to those things that we're passionate about. Maybe you could share something with us. You've worked in formation of Jesuits and also in education formation of a range of young people in schools. How have you found yourself bringing your passions and the disposition that comes from those passions to those ministries of formation?
Well, I think I did used to teach quite a lot of poetry and other forms of literature in senior forms in school. And every now and then that really works. It's something about this poem or this book or whatever is saying something about life. It's presenting you with life. It's not just referring to it. It's that deep engagement. And you can see kids, the penny can drop there. Oh, really? Yes. And, even now, decades later, I bump into people I taught, and they're all look about as old as I do. And they say, "Oh, you were the one who used to do that." Or with someone else sometimes, So yes, actually, that's what we did. That's what we did. Similarly, in formation, training Jesuits, especially in the 90s here in Parkville, as well as having for the Australian province, we had them for a number of the Asian provinces, especially from Indonesia and Korea. And I think they found that side of things. It's an area in formation that can get rather neglected. I was putting it a bit too sharply, but when it comes to the idea that God is true, we've got libraries and libraries full of books wrestling with that one. And God is good. Well, we put people on planes to go into immersions wherever, and so both of those are right. If you say, well, God is beauty or that God is beautiful, well, here's a ticket to the opera. Oh, shocking. Shocking. So it's an area that can so easily get neglected. I think so. We did things to unneglected. Yeah, that's right.
Andy, your own journey into Jesuit formation. Well, you began growing up in Wales and
yes,
ended up coming to Australia. Can you say a bit about that journey from life in Wales to life in Sydney and to the society?
Well, I grew up in a town called Bridgend, which is between Cardiff and Swansea, and otherwise unknown except to rugby fanatics. When I was 13, I had cancer of my leg, and my right leg was amputated. End of prospect of going to a boarding school. So I had 5 years subsequently in the local state secondary school. in the first 5 years of having this artificial limb. And I look back on that school with great affection. I was handled very carefully and well. And of course, I mean, I had a very powerful array of physical experiences and social ones too. So, you know, suddenly there I am going to hospitals and to prosthetic places, and I'm surrounded by old men who've lost bits of their bodies. And, you know, I went from just being an innocent child at the age of 13, you know, with the next 6 months, I'd seen far more than I should have. And my parents were told, if he's alive in 5 years, he's cured. Because there was no chemotherapy in 1960 or whatever. But anyway, so here I still am without chemotherapy. But, you know, I think back, gee, Mum and Dad, how do you do it? And there's no, you just do it.
And how did the call to the Jesuits unfold?
Well, it unfolded by when we came to Australia. I'd never seen or barely heard of a Jesuit until we came to Australia when I was 16. As I said, our parish, our world, insofar as it was into the orders, it was into the Benedictines, or the family connections and so on. But when we came to Australia, Dad came ahead, and he wasn't Catholic, of course. So Mum said to him something like, if there are Catholic schools in Australia, see if you can find one, sort of thing, for both myself and my brother and my two sisters. So he did. He went hunting, I think. If you go down to Kirribilli, there are 2 Catholic schools there. That's how I got in. That's how we got in. And the girls got into Kirribilli, which was much more harder nut to crack. I mean, a week after I left the school in Wales, I was in Aloysius. But basically 18 months, really. That was it, really. And that was the first connection with Jesuits. And there were quite a lot of Jesuits teaching in those days. And I was very struck by Pat McAvoy, who'd been in formation for a long time. He's a very clever man, and he taught Latin. I studied Latin for years and years and years, and I still don't like it. And I wasn't never particularly good at it. But anyway, I liked him. I was impressed by, I had a sense, I was very, later on, I'd say, by a sense of his integrity. Yeah. And I think there was something in me said, I want that, or whatever my own parallel of it was going to be. So, yeah. And so then, as I said, well, because of the age thing, I did this dreadful year of law at Sydney University, and then did this was in this group, Sodality group, and halfway through the year, I said to Kevin King, who was the chaplain, I think I've got a vocation. He handled it very well, and the society handled it very well. Especially, you know, here's this guy with a leg. We had one of those before, and what can we do with them? Anyway, in the end, there were 12 of us who went to join Watsonia in 1967. I think there's something in our spirituality that leads you to say yes when large parts of you are saying probably no, but you should say yes nevertheless. I think Ignatius is that, you know, he step into it. I'm thinking a bit about, you know, St. Ignatius Day this week, but he, whatever about Ignatius, whatever you are as a soldier, is you step into it. And, you know, the whole Pamplona story is he stepped into the line of fire. Well, I think we're supposed to be, if that doesn't happen sometime in your life.
Given that sense of stepping into it and Ignatian spirituality inviting that, if you're talking to a young man about joining the Jesuits today, what might it be that you'd say to him?
Well, I think I'd say that, actually. But I'd also say there's something about the Society's ministry, it's not peculiar to us, where the horizon is enormous. You may be doing something pretty small, you know, and, you know, something small and not terribly important, sort of in some ways, but it's got that vast, enormous horizon of the kingdom. And in some ways, our own ministries have kept that breadth of horizon. Wherever you are, you've got the whole world in your eyesight. I think that's perhaps unusual. Anyway, it's something that has heartened me, I must say. The big horizon. You want to live with a big horizon. And then there's what's between you, what's the distance between you, where you are doing whatever you're doing. You're putting kids on the buses and all that sort of stuff, or whatever it is. And actually, somehow this is all about the kingdom of heaven. Right, well, sort that out. But it's a good tension. That's a good tension. Yeah, it's very good tension.
Andy, that might be a good place to end. And thank you very much for, I think I've had a sense through everything you've shared today about that sense of a big horizon in which you've operated in a range of different ways. And especially as we started with the life of the imagination and of art and affectivity and all of that. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been great talking to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.